The global military establishment was forced to confront a staggering mathematical reality this morning, one that threatens to upend decades of Western strategic dominance. For nearly half a century, the blueprint for security has relied on a single expensive assumption: that sophisticated technology can provide an impenetrable shield against any intruder. But today, that shield is not just cracking, it is being bypassed by the most rudimentary of tools. We are witnessing the dawn of a new era in warfare where the cost of defense has become so prohibitively high that it is effectively bankrupting the very powers it was meant to protect. This is no longer a theoretical debate among academics in windowless rooms. It is a live, unfolding crisis currently playing out across the world's most vital maritime and energy corridors. The event that triggered this realization is the systemic failure of multi-million-dollar interceptor systems to neutralize a swarm of low-cost, off-the-shelf kinetic threats. In a series of recent engagements, defense batteries, the pinnacle of aerospace engineering, were forced to expend munitions costing upwards of $2 million per unit to down targets that cost less than a mid-range laptop. This is the asymmetric trap. It is a calculated, cold-blooded strategy designed to bleed a superpower dry, one interceptor at a time. As we track the movements of these low-cost swarms, the implications for global trade, energy security, and the sheer survival of the current international order cannot be overstated. We are looking at a fundamental shift in the physics of power. If you want to understand the deep-level intelligence and the economic undercurrents that are reshaping our world, you need to be part of this conversation. We are digging into the data that the mainstream headlines are missing. Before we move into the historical timeline that led us to this breaking point, ensure you are subscribed to this channel. Hit the notification bell now. You will want to be here for every update as the situation escalates. To understand how a $2,000 drone became the ultimate disruptor of the 21st century, we have to look back to the post-Cold War era of total technological overmatch. For 3 decades, the United States and its NATO allies operated under a doctrine of high-cost precision. The assumption was simple: if you build a weapon expensive enough and smart enough, no adversary would dare challenge it. This led to the development of the Aegis combat system and the Patriot missile batteries, marvels of engineering designed to intercept Soviet-era supersonic bombers and nuclear warheads. These systems were built for a world of titans, where the cost of entry into the superpower club was measured in the hundreds of billions. The first cracks in this doctrine appeared in the early 2000s, but they were largely ignored by the defense establishment. In October 2000, the USS Cole was crippled by a small fiberglass boat filled with explosives, a low-tech attack that cost a fraction of the ship's radar system. Fast forward to 2019, and the timeline of crisis accelerates. The Abqaiq Quraysh attack in Saudi Arabia saw a wave of low-cost drones and cruise missiles temporarily knock out 5% of the world's daily oil production. Despite billions of dollars spent on Western-made air defense systems, the glass jaw of the global energy infrastructure was exposed. The timeline moved from localized incidents to a systemic global phenomenon. By 2022, the battlefield in Eastern Europe became a laboratory for this asymmetric evolution. We saw the rapid deployment of suicide drones, essentially hobbyist electronics strapped to high explosives. Day one of this new era began with the realization that traditional air defenses were being saturated. By day 30, intelligence reports confirmed that for every $1 million interceptor fired, the adversary could launch 500 drones. The math was no longer in favor of the defender. This wasn't a failure of technology, it was a failure of imagination. The actors involved have shifted from traditional nation-states to decentralized networks that utilize off-the-shelf components to bypass international sanctions. These actors recognized a fundamental truth that the West missed. You don't need to destroy a carrier strike group if you can make it too expensive for that carrier to exist in a high-threat zone. Negotiations for regional stability have repeatedly failed because the traditional leverage of military superiority no longer carries the same weight. When the cost of a single day of defense exceeds the annual GDP of a small nation, the diplomatic table is no longer level. We are now standing at the end of that timeline, where the very tools meant to ensure our security have become the primary drivers of our economic vulnerability. The granular reality of this crisis crystallized during a 48-hour window that has sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. The event unfolded not as a singular explosion, but as a sustained, high-volume saturation attack designed to stress-test the digital and economic limits of modern air defense. According to naval and satellite data, a wave of low-altitude, slow-moving aerial threats, some constructed from little more than plywood and fiberglass, approached a critical maritime choke point. To the sophisticated radar of an Aegis-class destroyer, these targets appear as noise or clutter, yet their kinetic potential is lethal. The system is forced to make a binary choice in milliseconds: ignore the threat and risk a catastrophic hull breach, or engage using an interceptor that costs more than the average American home. Side A, representing the Western Coalition and its defense contractors, claims the engagement was a technical success. They point to a 100% intercept rate, asserting that every incoming threat was neutralized before reaching its target. On paper, the mission was accomplished. The ship remained unscathed and the crew was safe. However, military analysts are looking at a different set of numbers. They argue that Side A did not win the engagement. They were mathematically liquidated. In this 48-hour window, the defense expended nearly $80 million in munitions to neutralize a threat package that cost less than $50,000 to manufacture and launch. The competing narrative from Side B, the decentralized adversary, suggests that the goal was never to hit the ship. The success of the attack was the launch itself. By forcing the defender to empty its vertical launch system, VLS cells, the adversary achieved ordnance exhaustion. Once a ship fires its complement of interceptors, it is effectively a multi-billion-dollar paperweight until it can return to a specialized port for a multi-day rearming process. Intelligence reports now indicate that these low-cost swarms are being used as bait to map the electronic signatures of Western radar and to drain the logistical tail of the fleet. The key uncertainty remains the replenishment rate. While a factory in a sanctioned territory can churn out 1,000 drones a week using plastic molds and commercial GPS chips, the production of a single high-end interceptor missile takes months, if not years, involving complex global supply chains and rare earth minerals. We are witnessing a step-by-step deconstruction of the invincible naval picket. The evidence suggests that we have moved past the era of the lucky shot and into a period of deliberate algorithmic attrition. The question isn't whether the shield works. The question is how much longer we can afford to hold it up. The strategic significance of this mathematical failure cannot be confined to a single battlefield. It is a systemic threat to the very geography of global power. We are currently seeing this play out in the world's most sensitive maritime choke points, specifically the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea. These are not just shipping lanes. They are the jugular veins of the global economy. As of March 2026, the effective closure of these corridors due to low-cost saturation has redefined the word proximity. Traditionally, a military base or a carrier group provided a bubble of security. But when an adversary can launch thousands of drones from a mobile truck hidden in a mountain range, that bubble doesn't just burst, it becomes a liability. The base is no longer a platform for power projection. It is a fixed, high-value target that requires a multi-billion-dollar subscription fee in interceptors just to stay operational. The infrastructure at risk is equally critical. We are talking about deep water ports like Salalah in Oman and massive energy nodes that power entire continents. In the last few weeks, drone strikes have targeted logistics vessels and even disrupted cloud computing hubs in Bahrain, proving that the asymmetry trap extends into the digital and energy foundations of the modern state. If a $20,000 drone can disable a $1 billion ANTPY2 radar, as recent intelligence reports suggest has occurred, the strategic balance doesn't just shift, it flips. The side that once relied on total technological overmatch is now forced into a defensive crouch, guarding glass jaws that are too expensive to repair and too vital to lose. This isn't just about winning a skirmish. It's about the total erosion of the ability to protect the global commons. Intelligence assessments from the highest levels of the Pentagon and international think tanks like RAND and the CSIS are now sounding a frantic alarm. According to the 2026 National Defense Strategy, the United States is officially scrambling to bend the cost curve. Military analysts warn that the cost-exchange ratio has reached a terminal point. Expert Kelly Grieco of the Stimson Center notes that we are currently on the wrong side of an 85-to-1 exchange. For every hour an F-16 stays in the air to hunt a $20,000 Shahed drone, it costs the taxpayer over $25,000 in flight costs alone, and that's before a single missile is even fired. The consensus among institutional voices is that Goliath is being bled dry. Experts point to the stockpile reality, noting that while an adversary can churn out 50,000 drones a year using commercial-grade electronics, the Western industrial base is struggling to produce even a few hundred Patriot interceptors in the same time frame. We are witnessing what analysts call industrialized attrition, a form of warfare where the victor isn't the one with the best technology, but the one with the most resilient and affordable supply chain. The intelligence community is no longer asking if the interceptors will run out, but when. But the other side has a point, and it's one that Western planners are only beginning to acknowledge. From the perspective of the asymmetric actor, this isn't mindless terrorism or chaotic violence. It is a sophisticated, low-cost diplomatic lever. Analysts who study these mosaic defense structures argue that the goal isn't to start a world war, but to demonstrate that the cost of Western intervention has become too high for any democratic taxpayer to support. By utilizing off-the-shelf technology, they are bypassing the entire global arms control regime. They argue that the West's reliance on silver bullets is a self-imposed weakness, a strategic miscalculation born of a military-industrial complex that prioritizes profit over sustainability. There is also a credible argument that this drone blitz is a response to being shut out of traditional power structures. By forcing the world to acknowledge the vulnerability of the Strait of Hormuz or the port of Salalah, these actors are carving out a new form of digital and kinetic sovereignty. They aren't trying to build a better missile than the US. They are trying to prove that a better missile doesn't matter if you can't afford to fire it. This interpretation suggests that the current crisis is as much a political signal as it is a military one, a demand for a new global ledger where expensive technology no longer grants an automatic seat at the head of the table. The consequences of this math are hitting your wallet right now. As of late March 2026, marine cargo war risk premiums for transits through the Middle East have surged by a staggering 300% to 1,000%. For the average person, this isn't just a headline. It's the reason your gas prices are spiking and why the electronics you ordered are stuck in a logistical nightmare. When shipping companies have to pay 5% of a vessel's total value just for a few days of insurance, those costs are passed directly to you. We are looking at a structural shift in global inflation, driven not by policy, but by $2,000 drones that have effectively raised a tax on every gallon of oil and every shipping container on the ocean. Geopolitically, the impact is even more severe. NATO is being forced into an emergency reassessment of its joint doctrine. If Europe and the US can no longer protect maritime trade without bankrolling their own collapse, the alliances of the 20th century will begin to fracture. We are seeing a strategic overextension, where resources are being drained to protect static targets, while adversaries like China and Russia watch and learn, scaling their own drone production to levels that exceed NATO's current defensive capacity. Your regional security and the cost of your daily life are now tethered to a battle of the balance sheets. And currently, the balance is tilting toward chaos. What happens next will be defined by a desperate race for directed energy. The Pentagon is fast-tracking programs like the Lucas drone swarm and the Locust X3 laser system, hoping to replace $2 million missiles with $12 laser shots. Ukraine is already testing the Sunray system, a compact laser that fits on a pickup truck, as a low-cost alternative to total economic ruin. We are entering a period of radical military transformation where the golden dome of missile defense must either become dirt cheap or it will become a historical footnote. Watch for upcoming diplomatic summits where the primary topic won't be borders, but the regulation of commercial components used in weapons of mass attrition. Recapping the facts, the math of 20th century defense is dead. We know the interceptors are too expensive, we know the production lines are too slow, and we know the adversaries have found the cheat code to modern warfare. The scenario of escalation leads to a total maritime blockade and global economic depression. The scenario of de-escalation requires a complete overhaul of how we think about strength. The era of the $2 million interceptor is over. The question is, what will take its place before the bank account hits zero? This is the most critical geopolitical shift of our lifetime, and the mainstream media is still talking about the wrong numbers. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and understand the real forces driving the 2026 crisis, you cannot afford to miss our next briefing. Subscribe right now and turn on all notifications. Your support allows us to keep bringing you this level of investigative analysis. Like this video to help us beat the algorithm, and share it with someone who needs to see the real receipts of modern war. The world is changing faster than the missiles can fly. Stay vigilant.